Welcome back to Shaboom, the podcast all about baby boomers. I'm Rick K. Jones, your host. This is our fourth episode of season 2. And as you now know, if you listen to us, we each week have a theme and a word of the week. And today's word is perspective. That's so important in life to have perspective. And the definition of perspective is to look through and see more clearly. The capacity to view things in their true relations or their relative importance. That's what perspective is. It usually begins with context, doesn't it? Do you understand the situation broadly and not narrowly so that you see things so that you're able to have perspective on what's going on in your life? Here's a great quote about perspective from Annius Non. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. And that's so true. And a lot of times with perspective is we got to get out our own way and our own biases and our own prejudices, and we need to see the world as it really is, and we certainly need to see others as they are. John Lubbock said, what we see depends mainly on what we look for. Isn't that true? You know, sometimes you're looking this way, you don't even see what's here. And finally, Nietzsche said, and I love this quote, you have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, well, it does not exist. That's so true. We think we have all the answers. Well, the other guy thinks he has all the answers too that are totally against our answers. Perspective. One of my favorite stories of perspective is the story of girl goes off to college for her freshman year. And about midway through first semester, she writes a letter to her dad. And her dad opens the letter, and the dad goes, Dear Dad, I'm so sorry I've been unable to write. But, you know, with the baby coming and all, I've been very, very busy. You don't know the father. His name's Billy. You'll love all the tattoos that he has on his body. I met him the night of the big fire when our dormitory burned to the ground. But don't worry, Dad, I've moved into Billy's trailer, and we're doing just fine. The baby should be here in about 8 months. Okay, Dad, I made all that up. There was no fire. There's no Billy. There's no baby. But I am making 3 C's and a D, and I wanted you to keep things in perspective. What a great story, right? You flip that, you go, oh, those C's and D's, so that's okay. That's okay. Well, that's perspective. That's life. That's the way it is. So let me ask you this question. How is your perspective on life and living these days? My guest today knows a whole lot about perspective because he both lives it and teaches it every day. Tommy Kyle is the executive director of Nation of Coaches. Their website describes them this way: equipping college basketball coaches to leave a legacy of excellence. So let's welcome my friend, Tommy Kyle, to Shaboom. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rick. Great to be on.
Well, tell me and tell our listeners, what is Nations of Coaches?
Nations of Coaches was an organization that Jim Haney had a vision to start. He was the executive director of the National Association of Basketball Coaches. And he just felt like that in coaching, we'd kind of lost our way, that ultimately, Rick, I'll share a little bit of a story here I think you'll hit on later, but basketball was invented by a guy named Dr. James Naismith, 1891. And ultimately, his vision, it was actually in a Wall Street Journal article about 15 years ago, said the vision for basketball was to reach men for the master through the gym. And Jim's heart was really that as coaches, we're supposed to take it back. We've kind of lost our way, made it something it's not. It's unique when you think about history. I'm a history guy. That almost 100 years later, Jim Haney takes over the ABC, another James. And then God allows him to basically found a ministry that he wanted to support coaches spiritually and professionally. He understood the impact of a coach. Billy Graham said a coach will impact more people in a year than the average person will in a lifetime. But he asked a question. Dr. Graham said, so who's coaching the coaches? And that's really what Jim saw is, hey, let's create an organization to support my guys in this profession, my gals in this profession. The second part of Jim's vision is our marriages, the divorce rate in our profession was pretty high, and something had to be done. Felt like the enemy was still killing, destroying. And what are we going to do to pour back into and save marriages? 77% at the highest levels come from one or no parent homes. They've never seen a true family unit, and they ought to be able to see that. And then the third part was the vision of Nations of Coaches was the character development piece. We started out called chaplaincy. Today we call character coaches. We place character coaches working with teams all over America. That was really Jim's vision that 20 years ago. It's hard to believe that actually this April will be 21 years of Nations of Coaches.
Well, Dr. Naismith was a minister too. People forget this. I mean, he was a man of God, but he got some things luckily right, like the fact that balcony in the gymnasium where he nailed up that peach basket was 10 feet high. If it had been 12 feet high, I guess we would have 12-foot baskets.
Sure.
But it's really pretty amazing. But I've studied Dr. Naismith, and obviously I've studied John Wooden, who I felt was almost a reincarnation of Dr. Naismith, of understanding that basketball was a tool to reach young people. And he was a teacher and an educator. Dr. Naismith was that. One of the things I love was the lack of hubris. Dr. Naismith goes and he's the first basketball coach at Kansas, but he decides Fog Allen could be a better head coach, so he just becomes the assistant to Fog Allen. Who does that?
Right.
And yet he did that. I love Jim Haney. I had a chance to work with Jim for 13 years, and again, a man of God, a man of character, but understanding the big picture that he did when he became the executive director, like you said. I think what a lot of our listeners don't really understand in college basketball are the statistics that you gave of how many of our players come from single-parent households, how many of our players don't have, in many cases, a daddy in their lives. And so a coach is not only a coach, he is the father figure. And, we kind of look to our Heavenly Father for that role model that trickles down. Talk a little bit about that. The coach is a father.
You think about the coach aspect, or for any young person. I mean, we're all created and desiring, because it's the way Jesus created us, of a desire for a father. And a lot of these young men and women have never had that. And I think that in the coaching world today, in our profession, sometimes this profession has become about contracts. It's become about wins and losses. It's become about championships. And we kind of forget about really the true impact on that young man or that young girl. That, we used to say you got 2 to 4 years. Today we got 8 months. Our game has changed. But I really believe for a coach, our legacy is 20 or 30 years from now, when that young man or that young woman comes back with their family and says, hey, I want you to meet my coach. He changed my life for eternity. And it's what I've loved that Nations of Coaches has been able to do is help coaches understand what their real platform is, that they are father figures, that these really become their children, and they may have them for now 8 months or possibly 4 years, depending at the level you're at. But you're going to get a chance to pour into something that some of these young men and women never had poured into them, and it could change their life for eternity. It literally, with generational curses, could be broken. I think the Bible talks about the power of the tongue. It can speak life or death. And the power of a coach to cast vision into a young man's life and say, man, you've been created for something. you can, for something, it may or may not be. They talked about it last night on the first round of the games that, hey, only 1% will go on to play professionally. But the master coach, when he created you, he had a plan for your life, and it was good. It was for you to prosper. And that's the power of a coach. That's the power of a father. We cast vision and speak vision over our children's lives, over our young men's life that we coach, that literally could change their life for eternity.
Well, one of the sad things about today for coaches is, in my opinion, is social media. The pressure that somebody can just say anything online. I think about coaches that have their own children that have to read some of what I call the hate that's out there. And I think the gambling issue is just, I think it's going to become a massive issue. Um, you're going to blame an 18-year-old who missed a free throw and your team didn't cover the spread and somebody lost a whole bunch of money. I mean, we got a lot of wickedness going on out there in society right now that I think is going to affect our game. Then you put in transfer portal and NIL. You've just added to the complexity. And what I love about what y'all do is you go, look, we can't control that. But we can control what we can control. We can control your attitude. We can control your spirituality. We can hopefully control the health of your marriage. We're going to be here when you get fired. I had a coach tell me one time, Rick, there are two kinds of coaches, those that have been fired or those that are going to be
Yes,
fired.
yes.
Right. I mean, it's going to happen to all of us. But I love that. The other thing I was telling somebody the other day about your character coach, players sometimes worry about playing time. They can't expose themselves to their coach, but a character coach can hear everything that's going on in that young man or young woman's life. Talk a little bit about that, how that character coach can really be just such a blessing to the player.
So I'll go a couple places. One, you talked about the state of the game today. Our game today at the highest level for athletes is about, we call M&Ms, money and minutes. It's we don't even take visits anymore. We all have agents and we call, and how many minutes we're going to play and how much money you going to give me. And then you put that kid in this program, and he's there for 8 months. And so we think it's so important that every program has a character coach. And at the highest level today, a lot of our guys are full-time, and they're at every practice. They're at every film session. They're at every road trip. And our character coaches today, they pour into the coaches, they pour into their families. But one of their main focuses for that 8 months, that season, that young man or young lady's there, is those student athletes. Because inside of every one of us is the desire to feel safe, secure, and significant. It's the desire for someone to really see you. And I'll never forget, student athlete, character coach that served for about 2 years. And this was back before few years before the portal so active. And he walked up the second year, had nothing to do, didn't really come to any of the character moments, no Bible studies. And he walked up the second year and he looked at the character coach eye to eye and he said, "You really do just love us, don't you? You don't want anything from us." He had never been around. He's a high level athlete and everyone wanted something from him all his life. And he said it's the first time that anyone had ever just loved him. And it went on later that year, his father died. And this character coach drove halfway across the country to be there. And this young man ended up not only having an amazing basketball career, ended up going on to play professionally, but he radically fell in love with Jesus. In the last 2 years at this Power 4 university, he was one of the greatest spokesmen for God, for character, for everything we're about. He led the Bible studies. And it's just that desire that we all have in life for someone to love us, just for who we are. And Rick, what I love, I tell people all the time, this is what our character coaches do. We put light in dark places. And here's what we know. John 1:4 is the first time that God was ever referred to light. And John 1:5 says that darkness will never overcome it, and the world runs to light. And what I love is putting light in a dark place and watching young men and women run to it. And it's really what we've been able to do in 500 and something programs over the last 10 to 15 years. And then watching the master coach change men and women for eternity.
Yeah, I love that. Einstein was once asked, uh, basically, he told his professor there was no such thing as darkness. Darkness was merely absence of light. And the fact that you put the light on the positivity of the game and all that. I also know this, and look, coaches at the highest level are making, amazing amounts of money, but the stress on a marriage is, it's just real. I mean, again, a wife or a husband for a women's coach is having to listen to what's being whispered about, their spouse. They can't really do anything about that. They have to be supportive and all this. I love your marriage retreats and the fact that after a long season, you allow coaches and their spouses to get reconnected with each other. But what I also like is that when you go to a marriage retreat, you realize I'm not alone. My marriage is not, I got a whole bunch of other coaches and their marriages that we can all contribute. Talk a little bit about that because I am so impressed with what y'all do with the wholeness of the coaching family.
So I'm gonna be honest. I remember sitting in Jim's office when he shared with me about Tommy, the divorce rate in our profession. I think at the time it was about 20% higher than the national average. And I'm thinking, man, I don't know that my marriage was really good. And about 2 years in, I went and sat down with the guy that runs a large, large company that I knew that he focused on marriages of his executives, his staff, also others. And I said, hey, look, this is what I've been asked to do, and I need your help. And he said, yes. And we've partnered with some of the best marriage resources in the world. Um, and then probably about 14 years ago, 15, Rick, we did our first marriage retreat and they helped us do it. And now we do two of those a year. Um, and I don't care. Take it, not even the coaching world. If you and I, just some of your listeners today would probably go, I'm not going to any marriage retreat. I got it figured it out. And but once we got coaches there, to today, our marriage retreats are full. Like we have to ask people not to come more than 2 to 3 years in a row. We fill up every room. We put our staff off. We had 170 people last year in August. And I'll never forget going back to even with our coaches, you talk about creating a safe environment. We always have a share time within the marriage retreat. And about 6 years ago, we had a coach stand up and he said, I'm just going to be honest. Took the microphone. I didn't want to be here. And he said, I'm here because my wife made me. And he started crying. This is a high level coach. And he said, but I'll never miss another one. This is the first time I've been to a place that I feel like I can let my hair down. Now, Rick, he looked like you and I. He didn't have any hair. But what we've created is a place of safety where everyone in that room, they understand each other's world. They understand the stresses. They understand the struggles. They understand the things they carry. And probably the greatest thing that happened for our ministry in COVID was we took all our coaches' Bible studies online. And one of our wives came to us in our marriage and family team and said, hey, what if we start a wives Bible study? And I'm like, yeah, what's your big, hairy, audacious goal? They said, oh, if we could get 40 wives. Well, that fall, Rick, they had 140 coaches' wives. Today, our wives ministry, they will have almost 300 to 400 wives show up on Thursday at the Final Four. And we've created a safe place for these people. Two quick stories. I'm a storyteller, but two quick stories. I had a coach on when they called me and said, hey, he got beat, got put out of the tournament. He was done. He didn't want to watch any more basketball. And he came home and his wife was watching March Madness. And she said, baby, what are you doing? Now, most wives, and you know this, Rick, about our profession, they despise the sport because it takes their husband, it takes everything from the family. Maybe my friends, that's my friends playing. Like they were so connected with the other wives in their Bible study. They were watching them, celebrating them like every into every game. After COVID, the first Final Four in New Orleans, we have it's called we have a coach's wives deal there. And man, they had like 400 to 500 wives. Priscilla Shire spoke, and one of the ladies came and got me and said, Coach Kyle, I want you to look at that table right there. And I said, yeah, it's a table of wives. She said, no. She said, every one of those women are at the Final Four without their husbands. Now, in our profession, the Final Four used to be you left your families at home. It wasn't you looked for your next job and you blew off steam. It was kind of a men's weekend. I'll never forget this testimony. One wife said to her husband who got the flu, baby, call your mom. I put some stew in the refrigerator.
I'm going to the Final
I'm
Four.
going to the Final Four. And it's become today, Rick, where in Indianapolis in a few weeks, I'm going to watch these groups of wives act like sorority girls. And that's what God's allowed us to do, the service. You talk about the whole family and help them connect and help them be seen and help them have a family to go. And it's been amazing so in the last 10 years, 650 plus families we've been able to serve through our marriage ministry. Rick, we've seen 23 families that God restored their marriage after divorce papers were filed. Unreal, just unreal. We're able to put them. They're called intensives. It's 4 days of counseling. It's a year and a half worth of counseling. It has an 82% success rate of God restoring a marriage after that. And so, man, we've been blessed. That's probably been, as you said, for me, that and character coaching are two of the greatest things we do.
No, there's no question about it. The other thing that I'm really impressed. I'm married to a prayer warrior. I mean, my wife, and everybody knows that. I mean, anytime anybody has any problem, they go, I'm going to go to Charlotte because I know she's going to pray for me. And not only is she going to pray for me, she's going to hitch my wagon to all her other connected prayer
Yep.
warriors. But y'all ask us right before the Final Four to pray for the coaches and pray for teams. And I love that. I love the fact that you reach out to us and say, hey, this is a time of joy and a time of, but it's also a time of heartbreak. It's a time people are losing their jobs. It's a time that people forget about assistant coaches. A coach loses his job, that assistant, they got to up and move. They got children in middle school that now you got to go to your daughter and go, honey, I know you love being here. And we've been here for 6 years, but we got to move. I mean, it's stressful. It's a horrible time. And somebody asked me the other day, I said, look, in my time working with you and working with Jim and working with the NABC, I got to be great friends with all these coaches, and your heart goes out. And so anytime somebody loses their job, it's heartbreak. And the prayer is not that the bad things are going to happen, because they are going to happen. The prayer is, can Jesus help you handle that, the good and the bad?
Right.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, first of all, running a ministry, I share all the time. Obviously, we have to raise resources to serve these coaches and families. People used to go, "Why weren't you going to go?" No, we've partnered with people that understand discipleship and what God's called us to do. But I tell people all the time, and I just spoke at a missions conference at a church not long ago, and I mean this: nations of coaches is where nations of coaches is today because of God's people prayed. Second Chronicles 7:14, when it says, when we humble ourselves and pray, that's when God comes from heaven to earth. And what God's allowed us to do in this profession is through people praying. And I'll tell you a quick story of on prayer back in COVID. I had a Division I coach at an HBCU school call me 5:30 in the morning, and he's just weeping, just didn't know if he's going to get the team to play. I mean, all the different things we went through COVID. And he just said, Tommy, I just need you to pray. I just need people to pray for us. And that year was the year that we started on March 1st, and we've done it every year since, a day of prayer for college basketball, for the coaches, for their spouses, for their families, for the athletes, because the world will celebrate this month March Madness. and it is madness. But for us, a lot of times, as much as I love the games, and I love the games, I'm like you. I sit down on the first Thursday and Friday. I want to watch every game. The greatest thing for me for all my life has been one shining moment. I never miss a one shining moment when we close it out. I love it. But what the world a lot of times doesn't think about, there'll be anywhere from 180 to 200 coaches lose their jobs this year. It's already happening. And some of these are really good people and they go, oh, they got money. Well, that's not always the case because there's usually 8 to 9 coaches and some of them aren't making much already. And a lot of them won't get another job. And then we don't talk about mental health and the pressure. And yeah, we're paying some of these guys a lot of money these days, but we're not really teaching them how to do it. But there'll be 30,000 athletes that in March will be the last time they'll ever touch a ball. And they've been touching that ball since they were 7 and 8 years old. And they got to deal with what's next. They got to deal with just what's God's plans next and the pressure. And some of them, you were supposed to support the whole family, and they weren't in the 1.2% that's going to go on and play professionally. And so for us, as much as we love the madness, it's the madness behind the scenes of people losing jobs, careers ending for student athletes, and helping people navigate what's next. I'll give you one story. Um, Jim, and I'll give credit to Jim Haney for this. Him and Pastor Brett Fuller. They said, Tommy, we're going to be an organization that always gives back. So we give 12% of every dime that comes in Nations Coaches back to coaches and others and serve them. To this moment, we've given over $2 million away. So we had a coach just already this year that he got fired and he had a winning record, but he got fired because the school couldn't make the budget. And we were able, and someone allowed and let us know that he was not able to make house payment. And we were able to write a check to make the next 3 months of house payments. And that coach called me the other day and shared this. He said, I just want you to know he said, I've always had a plan. I've always had a plan. And this caught me by surprise. And he said, I've been praying for a week. And he said, I went to the mailbox today and he said, I got the check. And he said, I just started weeping. And, that's this time of the year. There's a lot of those coaches and spouses that they've always had a plan. And then all of a sudden, something happens and they lose a job and they don't know what the next step is. And so, we always ask and encourage, hey, pick your favorite team, pick a local team. Just pray for those coaches this month. Pray for their families this month. Pray for those student athletes. Because this is what we do know. A master coach has a plan. And even though they may lose a job, even though the career may be over, hey, we want to help them find out what God's plan is for their life.
Well, our word for the day is perspective. And I think y'all bring great perspective to the industry in so many ways. I am a believer that, and I've told people this story. I think the first thing that happens when we get to heaven is God's going to show us the quilt.
Mm,
And the quilt are all of the stitches
mm,
that we didn't know. We touched this life, that touched that life, that touched that life. And we're going to see in the totality of who we served and maybe not even know we served them, but are going to be reminded of that. And coaches really are teachers and servants. I mean, that's what they really are. And y'all are the servants for the coaches, which I think about that. This whole season of Shaboom the theme is turning success into significance. And the significance y'all are bringing to coaches' lives is extraordinary. Tell our listeners how they can support Nations of Coaches.
well, just what I said is first thing is pray. You pray for this ministry. You pray for as we serve this month and throughout the rest of the year. And then we are a nonprofit. And people ask me all the time, Tommy, how can I give? And there's a lot of ways as we're growing and reaching. There's 3,880 programs. We've got a 2030 plan to be able to reach every one of them if they want to be served. We're only in less than half of those now. And so that takes people giving. And you may want to support a local character coach. May want to support a regional coach. You may want to support a scholarship of marriage. For a lot of these coaches can't afford to go to a marriage retreat, and we have to pay for that or an intensive. So we'd love to have you give and partner that way. And hey, there's a large group of people today that are hanging up their work hat at 65, and they're going, "Hey, I still got some fire in the tank." We love to partner with people that want to help serve in this profession. So maybe you love God and you love basketball. Well, hey, look us up at www.nationsofcoaches.com, and we would love to put your work there. I'd even share this. Go to our website. We just dropped a video last week. You want to talk about significance? We say this. Our mission statement is to equip coaches to leave a legacy of excellence. And watch the video that we dropped of Rick Barnes and his testimony last week. Um, there's a guy, and it says in that video that he maximizes his platform today at Tennessee to reach everyone. We're not just talking about his players, people in the arena, people in the state, people that work at university. Every aspect, he's going to share Jesus with them. And that's our goal. That's significance. We're using the platform we've been given. And man, we need partners to help us do that.
Well, I can't thank you for what you do enough. Again, I've been around the game for a long time. I've been around coaches for a long time. I see how you're changing lives because I know you're helping coaches change other lives. It is a big quilt. I think when you're going to get to heaven, you're going to look at your quilt and you're going to go, goodness gracious, how many coaches did we serve? How many players did they serve? How many communities did they serve? Then those players went on to serve their communities and build, like you said, break curses, break generational problems. Again, I had a football coach tell me one time, he said, I love bowl games. He said, not because we get to play another game, but because my players see me with my kids and my
Mm,
wife. And and many of them have never seen what a good husband and a good father looks like. And I want them to emulate that kind of behavior, and that's what we're doing right now, and, it's a tribute to what you guys are doing, and that's why I wanted to have you on Shaboom. We talk to baby boomers. We're talking to a lot of those that can give financially, they can give with their time. I got a lot of guys out there that love college basketball. Get involved. You can if you're a man of God, you can get involved with a team right now and make a difference in a way that I think is pretty compelling.
yeah, Rick, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all you do here and you've done for this profession. I mean, you were one of the first guys Jim introduced me to when he brought me on, and you've always been a friend. I tell people all the time, one of my favorite passages is Mark 9:35. And it's when Jesus set his boys down and said, "Hey, I know y'all are arguing about being great. You want to be great? The first to be last and servant of all." And if you break servant there in the Greek and Hebrew, it means to leverage our time, our talent, our treasure to meet the needs of others. That's true greatness. And Rick, thank you. You've always leveraged your time, your talent, your treasure to meet the needs of others.
Well, I appreciate that. I love you. I love the organization. I think the best things are ahead, not behind us. I think in this time of all this craziness in college basketball, the needs are greater than ever, but I think we're going to meet those needs. And I appreciate all you do. And thank you for being part of Shaboom today.
Thank you, brother. God bless you.
It's now time for the song of the week, and it is all about perspective. It's the classic song from the Disney movie Aladdin called A Whole New World. Remember that? Aladdin picks her up, puts her on that magic carpet. You see the world in a way that you'd never seen it before. And that's what perspective is about. It's about seeing the world as we haven't seen it before. Our playlist has a bunch of great songs about perspective. Two are from one of my favorite singer-songwriters who we lost way too early to cancer, a guy named Harry Chapin. Harry had a wonderful song called Me and My Arrow. It was from a made-for-TV show called The Point. What's the point of life? Me and my shadow. And then he had the classic song about perspective called Cats in the Cradle, about a dad that didn't have an involvement with his son, and the son grew up to be just like him and has no time for him. It's a great song about perspective. There's a song by Bruce Springsteen all about perspective called Glory Days. Are you living in the past or have you moved on? Can you continue to grow and continue to learn? And then Paul Simon had a great song that he wrote called Slip Sliding Away. slip sliding away. How's your life? How's your perspective? And that kind of thing. That's our song, musical soundtrack for the week. It's now time to get back on the road with Rick. Hey, we've just finished March Madness, and you all know how much I love college basketball. So I want to talk about some of the great venues in college basketball where I've been and where you need to go. The first one is Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke University, one of the oldest continuously operated gymnasiums in America. The Cameron Crazies, you know all about that. Very small, very intimate place. It's a place where Duke plays. You need to go to Cameron. Number two is Pauley Pavilion at UCLA, the house that John Wooden built. Wonderful thing. They have food trucks around that complex that you leave your seat and you can go to unique food trucks. So like you can get Korean barbecue and other things at Pauley Pavilion to eat. It's a great place full of history. Rupp Arena, Lexington, Kentucky. No one loves basketball like people in Kentucky love Kentucky basketball. They bleed blue. Rupp Arena is one of the great places. One of my favorite places is the Palestra in Philadelphia on the campus of Penn University, where they used to have the Big Five would play so many games there. A few years ago, I went to a doubleheader. I saw Temple play Maryland at 11:30 in the morning, and then came back for the nightcap, which was St. Joe's versus Penn. Palestra is a great place. The Dean Dome at Chapel Hill on North Carolina's campus, the house that Dean Smith built. Before the Dean Dome, they had a wonderful gymnasium called Carmichael. It was a great venue. This is where Jordan played and all the great Carolina players played before they moved into the Dean Dome. And then there's my favorite gym in America is on the University of Kansas campus. It's the Fog Allen Field House. It is just the best place. Let me tell you how important it is. Dr. Naismith coached at Kansas. Fog Allen was the next coach after Dr. Naismith. The rules of basketball that Dr. Naismith wrote out are in the lobby. They're stored and displayed in the lobby at Allen Fieldhouse. It's a pretty important place. There's also 4 great venues in one state, the state of Indiana. You should do what I call the Jimmy Chitwood. If you know that name, that's the hero in the movie Hoosiers. Do the Jimmy Chitwood tour of Indiana basketball. You got to go to Assembly Hall at IU. Great venue, great history. Go up to Purdue to Mackey. Go over to Notre Dame to the Joyce Center, and then finish up in Indianapolis at Hinkle. Hinkle's the famous field house that was in Hoosiers, the famous field house where Milan High School, smallest school in the state, won the state championship back in the early 1950s. Those are 4 great venues that you've got to go to on the road with Rick. So to our playlist, because of college basketball, I've added 3 songs about basketball to the playlist. Back when NBC, and for baby boomers, we remember when NBC actually broadcast March Madness. Billy Packer, Dick Enberg, and Al McGuire were the 3 personalities. And the song that they played for March Madness was the Kenny Loggins song, This Is It. And then, of course, when CBS took it over, they changed the theme song to a song called One Shining Moment by a great artist named Luther Vandross, another artist that we lost way too soon. And then finally, if you ever played high school basketball at any level, you warmed up to the great song The Horse by Cliff Noble. Those are on our playlist today. It's now time for the boom. Here's the question I want to ask you. Does sports teach values, or does it just rather reveal them? That's an interesting question. One of my favorite heroes is a guy named Bill Bradley. I think I've talked about Bill Bradley a lot over the years. Bill Bradley, All-American at Princeton, Rhodes Scholar, later played for the New York Knicks, didn't have much of a career after that, was a United States Senator from state of New Jersey, later ran for president. An amazing career, an amazing human being. He wrote a book a few years ago called Values of the Game. Values of the Game. It's about the values that you learn from college basketball. And I actually used this when I coached 8th grade basketball as our textbook. And so here's some of the values that he talks about: passion, discipline, selflessness, respect, perspective, our word of the day, courage, leadership, responsibility, resilience, and imagination. All attributes that he said he learned from playing basketball. Um, so I ask you the question again. Does sport teach character, or does it merely reveal it? I'd like to hear back from you, and that's our boom for the day. It's now time to take a trip down memory lane. Heck, we've been talking about college basketball. Let me tell you about my first trip to the Final Four. I was a young coach at the University of the South in Swanee, Tennessee, and I got to go to the 1981 Final Four in Philadelphia. Never been to Philadelphia. Some older coaches kind of took me under their wing. I remember they took me to dinner at a place called Bookbinders, which was a great seafood restaurant in Philadelphia, and how impressed I was with that. And mostly I was impressed because I wasn't making a lot of money and they picked up the check, which was very, very kind. 81 was a very interesting Final Four. You had 4 great teams in the finals. You had in the first semifinal on Saturday, you had Dale Brown brought a great team out of LSU, Rudy Macklin, great players, and they played Indiana in the semifinals. Indiana had Isaiah Thomas, Ray Talbert, Randy Whitman, great, great team. In the other semifinal, you had a repeat. You had a Virginia team that had beaten North Carolina 3 times in the regular season, twice home and home in the ACC tournament, and now they're meeting for the 4th time. North Carolina against Virginia in the other semifinal. Well, Indiana beat LSU, and North Carolina, behind a great game by a friend of mine, Al Wood, upset Virginia and Ralph Sampson and made it to the championship game. So the championship game is on Monday night. Not so fast. Monday morning, President Reagan goes to give a speech at the Hilton Hotel at Duval Circle. And when he comes back to his car, he gets shot, and they rush him off to the hospital. He's in surgery. Now, if you know the story about Reagan, 2 really funny statements. When Nancy Reagan got to him in the hospital, now he's been shot. Now, people didn't know how serious it was. It was very serious. He had a bullet very near his heart. And so people kind of poo-pooed it and said, oh, he's been shot, but he's fine. He wasn't fine. But when Nancy showed up, he looks up at her and he goes, honey, I forgot to duck, which is just so Reagan-like. But the best line of all is when they wheeled him in to be operated. He looked up at all the doctors and nurses and he said, promise me you're all Republicans. What a great line. Okay, he's in surgery. We don't know if we're going to play the game. The president could die. And Wayne Duke was the head of the Big Ten at the time. He was the commissioner of the Big Ten. He was head of the men's basketball committee. He's waiting to decide, are we going to play this game between North Carolina and Indiana for the national championship? And so we're all in Philadelphia wondering what's going to happen. And the legendary story is that when Reagan came out of surgery and he survived, the first thing he said was, can you make sure there's a TV in my room? I want to watch the game. Wayne Duke said, if the president wants to watch the game, we're going to have a game. And boom, we had one of the great national championship games that Indiana beat North Carolina. Dean Smith versus Bob Knight. That's my trip down memory lane. Finally, it's time for the last word. Here's a story about people that think they're so important. I want you to take a bucket of water, fill that water up to the top. Then I want you to put your hand in that bucket of water, and I want you to shake that bucket of water and all around and make all kinds of noise and show all kinds of things and all kinds of waves and all that. And then take your hand out of the bucket and see how much it's missed. How much is it missed? All of us are going to leave the world, and for us baby boomers, we're going to probably leave it a little sooner than later. So what's your real legacy going to be? What's left when the hand is out of the bucket? And that's today's last word. And we'll see you next week on Shabbat.